Imagine this: you are a devoted husband, a father of two, building a perfect life for your family. And suddenly you find out that your partner, the person you loved with all your heart, is secretly seeing someone else. What would you do? Would you forgive her? Would you leave? What if instead you decided not only to ruin her affair, but to deprive her of everything? And now she is betrayed, destroyed, on her knees, begging you for one thing: a chance to regain the right to see her children. Does she have a chance for redemption? Find out about the cold-blooded revenge that turned into a struggle for the family. Once upon a time, Jack and Anna were a perfect couple, considered by all their friends to be a model of love and harmony. They had been together for almost 10 years, married for 8 of them. Many people around them felt jealous. They had everything one could dream of. Jack was a successful IT entrepreneur, and Anna was a talented interior designer who was always in great demand among wealthy clients. Life seemed perfect for them. Traveling together, an expensive house, 2 wonderful children, all this created the image of a family ideal. Jack and Anna met at university. He was a young programmer who spent sleepless nights working on startups, and she was an ambitious architecture student who wanted to create something great. They fell in love at first sight, and this love only grew stronger over the years. Or so Jack thought. Everything in their life seemed to be going according to plan. After the wedding, they both plunged into work. Anna took on the most challenging projects, and Jack developed his business, which grew every year. Money, fame, success, they achieved everything they had ever dreamed of. And Jack was happy, because Anna was not just his wife, she was his muse, friend, and partner in all his endeavors. However, as often happens, the perfect picture hid a bitter reality. Recently, Jack began to notice changes in his wife's behavior. She often stayed at work late, explaining that she was working on new big projects. She stopped consulting him, and their conversations became short and dry. At first, Jack thought it was just fatigue, stress from working too much. But gradually, he began to feel anxious. He began to worry about how often she forgot about their family plans, and there were unexpected weekend trips. One day, when he came home earlier than usual, Jack found Anna talking to someone on the phone in the kitchen. Her voice sounded particularly warm and gentle. "Yes, I miss you too." "No, he doesn't notice anything." "Don't worry, I'll figure out a way to be together more soon," she whispered, not even noticing that Jack had entered the room. He froze in place, feeling his heart sink. What kind of conversation is this? He asked himself. His wife, whom he loved more than life itself, was talking to someone else the way she had only ever talked to him. At that moment, Jack didn't snap, didn't make a scene. Instead, he pretended that nothing had happened. He smiled, asked her how she was doing, and acted like he always did. But inside, everything was falling apart. That night he couldn't sleep. Jack struggled with his thoughts, trying to find an excuse for her behavior. Maybe she's just a friend, he convinced himself. But the feeling of suspicion did not leave him. The next morning, he decided to act. Jack installed a program on her phone that allowed him to see all her messages and calls. At first, he felt terrible, because it was low to spy on your own wife. But the more he read, the stronger his belief became: she was cheating on him. Anna's lover turned out to be their neighbor, Adam, a young architect who had recently started his own business. They had been dating for almost a year, secretly spending time together when Jack was at work or traveling on business trips. Each of their correspondences was like a knife to Jack's heart. Anna told Adam what she had previously told only him. She shared her dreams with him, told him how she felt about her marriage, and even discussed their plans for the future, without Jack. All this while Jack thought they could still be happy. Instead of telling her the truth, however, he decided to proceed with caution. Over the next few months, Jack changed. He became even more attentive, even more caring. He bought her flowers, cooked her breakfast, and offered to spend time together. Anna even started to feel guilty about her betrayal, but that didn't stop her. She promised herself that in a little more time, she would leave Jack forever. But at that time, Jack was already preparing his revenge plan. Thanks to his status and connections, Jack learned everything about Adam's business. He realized that the young architect had many weaknesses: a lack of finances, a failed project, and problems with investors. And Jack decided to strike here. One day, he invited Adam to a meeting at an expensive restaurant. Adam didn't know that Jack knew about his relationship with Anna, so he showed up, even though he was nervous. Jack behaved as he always did, smiling, polite, friendly. "I know you're dating my wife," Jack said calmly when the first course arrived. Adam froze, his eyes widening. "What? I don't deny it. I know everything." Jack handed him some printed photos. They showed Adam and Anna holding hands, kissing in the park, walking along the waterfront. "You took my wife from me, and now I'm going to take your business from you." Adam was at a loss for words. Jack stood up and looked down at him. "I'm going to make sure you lose everything you've worked for. And believe me, I won't stop until you're left with nothing. Until your business goes bankrupt, until you lose everything you care about. Because you didn't just betray me, you stole my life from me. And now you're going to pay for it." With that, Jack walked out, leaving Adam alone with his thoughts. Adam sat in the half-empty restaurant, trying to understand what had just happened. His hands were shaking and his heart was beating furiously in his chest. He could feel panic taking over his mind. Jack knew everything, but why was he talking so calmly? Why didn't he snap, smash his face in? Were they just threats? Adam tried to find at least a drop of confidence in himself, but when he remembered Jack's cold gaze, his hopes that it was all a game melted away. When he returned home, he immediately called Anna. She answered in surprise when she heard his excited voice. "What happened?" she asked. "Jack knows. He knows about us," Adam whispered, afraid that even the walls of their apartment would hear his words. "What? How? That's impossible." Anna froze in place. She could feel her legs giving out. "What did he say to you?" "He said that he would destroy my business. That he would take everything from me." His voice was trembling. Anna sat down abruptly on the couch. There were thousands of thoughts going through her head. She knew that Jack was not someone who gave up easily. If he decided to take revenge, he would act carefully, unmistakably, and methodically. She had delayed her decision for a long time, and now she was paying the price. She should have left him when she first started dating Adam, instead of dragging out this lie for so long. But now it was too late. What to do now? "We have to meet. We have to talk it out," she said, trying to remain calm. The next day they met at Adam's office. Anna arrived a few hours early, before it opened, to avoid prying eyes. They sat in a small conference room, their faces tense. "Do you realize this is a disaster for me?" Adam spoke nervously. "If he really takes action, I'm going to be in serious trouble. Jack is not just a wealthy man, he has connections in the financial world. If he decides to attack, my investors will abandon the projects, and banks will close their accounts. I will go bankrupt." Anna was silent. She knew Adam was right. Jack was one of the most powerful entrepreneurs in town. How could she have been so blind? She thought she was in control, that Jack was so passionate about his work that he would never suspect her. But it turned out he had known everything for a long time, and was waiting. "Maybe we should talk to him," Anna suggested quietly, even though she knew it was pointless. "Talk to him?" Adam looked at her as if she had said something ridiculous. "It's Jack. If he said he's going to destroy me, he's going to do it. He didn't come to talk to me, he came to warn me of the end. You have to stop him, Anna. Ask for forgiveness, go back to him, do whatever you have to do, but don't let him do it." Anna felt despair overwhelm her. She could no longer keep control of her life. Instead of being the strong and independent person she thought she was trapped between two men. One was her lover, who was now afraid of losing everything, and the other was her husband, who was slowly but inevitably taking revenge on her for his betrayal. Jack, meanwhile, continued to act. He sent anonymous messages to several of Adam's investors, pointing out suspicious transactions in the company, attaching fabricated evidence. He didn't just want to destroy Adam's business, he wanted to do it legally, so that Adam had no chance of being saved. The next few weeks were a living hell for Adam. One by one, investors began to withdraw their investments, accounts were blocked, and projects were halted. Adam tried to call Jack and meet with him, but he didn't answer. Instead, representatives of the tax service came to him with an audit. The situation was getting out of hand, and Adam gradually realized that he had lost. But this was only the beginning. Jack was not going to stop. He decided to destroy everything that was important to Adam, including Anna. One evening, when Anna returned home after meeting with Adam, she discovered that Jack had taken the children. Panic gripped her. "Where are my children?" she screamed into the phone when she finally got through to him. "They are with me." "And you're not going to see them again," Jack replied coldly. "You can't do this." "I'm their mother," her voice broke, tears rolling down her cheeks. "You are a mother? A mother who cheats on her husband? You have no idea what I can do. Did you think you'd get away with it, Anna? Did you think I would let you ruin our life, our future? You don't even realize who you're dealing with." His voice sounded cold and ruthless. "I'll deprive you of the right to see your children. You will be left with nothing. Just like your lover." Anna froze. Her world was crumbling before her eyes. Everything she'd betrayed for, love, freedom, a future with Adam, was shattered into thousands of pieces. Jack had really taken everything. And most importantly, he took her children away from her. The next few months were a nightmare for Anna. She lost her job, her clients, having learned about the scandal in her family, began to cancel their contracts. Adam tried to save his business, but soon declared bankruptcy. And when Anna tried to ask him for help, he simply pushed her away. "It's all because of you. If you had left him earlier, this wouldn't have happened," he shouted, looking at her with hatred. "We were together. I loved you," she pleaded. "You have destroyed everything, Anna. Now you will be alone," he said and walked away, leaving her in an empty apartment. Since then, Anna has never heard from Adam again. Anna was left alone, sitting on the floor of her empty apartment, replaying the events of the past few months over and over in her head. She had lost everything: her children, her lover, her job, and most importantly, her place in life. Not even a trace of her former comfort remained. The house where she lived with Jack was now inaccessible to her, and Jack had completely cut off the children from any contact. He had every reason to do so: financial influence and an army of lawyers who proved that Anna was unstable and unprepared to raise children because of her double life. Instead of fighting, she started avoiding calls from her lawyers and didn't even show up for the last court hearing. Her world, which had once seemed perfect, had fallen apart, and the seemingly most stable man in her life, Jack, had become her greatest enemy. From then on, her life resembled a series of endless and meaningless days. Morning flowed into evening, and evening into night, but she lost all sense of time. None of her friends called her anymore, because everyone now knew her story. The traitor who lost everything was what they said about her behind her back. Those she considered friends turned their backs on her, and her colleagues no longer respected her. Her parents, who had always supported her, didn't even answer her last call. They had always loved Jack and considered him the perfect man, so the fact that Anna could betray him so contemptuously came as a real blow to them. One day, when she had almost given up hope, Anna received a message on her phone. It was from an unknown number. "Tomorrow at 10 a.m. in the park near the Central Square. Come alone. I will tell you something important about your children." Anna froze, her heart sinking at the thought that this could be some kind of joke or another one of Jack's treacherous moves. But she couldn't help but show up. It was the only thread that connected her to the children, the only chance she had to learn anything about them. The next day, she arrived at the park ahead of schedule. Her appearance had changed a lot. Her hair was tousled, her skin was pale, and her eyes had lost their luster. She looked around, looking for the person who had sent her the message. A few minutes later, a woman approached her. She was tall, businesslike, and dressed strictly. She was holding a folder. "Are you Anna?" she asked coldly. "Yes, I am." "Who are you? What do you know about my children?" Anna rushed to the woman with desperation in her voice. "Sit down and I'll explain everything," the stranger said, pointing to the nearest bench. Anna obediently followed her instructions, not even noticing that her legs were shaking. "My name is Lisa, and I work with families going through difficult divorces. I was hired by Jack to keep an eye on the kids and make sure they get the psychological help they need after your breakup," she began in an emotionless voice. Anna clenched her fists. She could feel that something was wrong here. Psychological help? What kind of absurdity is this? The children hadn't survived the trauma, or had they? "What do you mean?" Her voice trembled. "Your children are in a bad way now, Anna. They think you abandoned them. Do you know what Jack told them about how you betrayed him?" Lisa paused, gauging Anna's reaction. Anna paled even more. She couldn't even imagine that Jack would do that, tell the children about her affair. They were still too young to understand what had happened, but now every memory they had of her was shattered by those horrible words. "Mom left us. Mom loves another man more than us." She covered her face with her hands, trying to hold back her tears, but it was no use. "Why does he do this?" she sobbed. "Why break their hearts?" Lisa sighed, softening her tone a bit. "Jack is deeply hurt, and he thinks you deserve every word. But children don't understand all the nuances, Anna. They just think you're a traitor who abandoned them. I came here to offer you a chance. A chance to see them again." Anna looked up. Her eyes were filled with a hope that hadn't been there for a long time. "What chance?" she whispered. "You have to agree to Jack's terms. He's willing to give you permission to see the kids, but..." "But what?" Her voice sounded like a desperate cry. "But you have to sign a document saying that you completely give up your rights to them. You will never be able to claim custody again, even if Jack wants to. You'll just be a guest to them," Lisa finished. Anna froze. She looked at the woman, at the file she was holding out, and couldn't believe her ears. "A guest? Is this some kind of a joke offer?" she exhaled, barely holding back her rage. "It's the only option. Either you sign this and get the right to see them sometimes, or..." "Or what?" Anna could barely hold back her tears. "Or you'll never see them again," Lisa said calmly. "Jack will make sure it's legal. With all your mistakes and what happened, he's almost convinced the court. And if you don't agree, he'll move on. You will lose everything completely. He has already arranged for you to be declared unfit to raise children." Anna staggered as if she had been hit in the face. Unfit to raise children. These words echoed in her head like a terrible sentence. She sat on the bench long after Lisa had left. Anna looked at the folder with the documents that turned her from a mother into a guest in her children's lives. Her face was wet with tears, but she didn't even feel it. She was facing the hardest choice of her life: either she would agree and see her children at least occasionally, or she would never see them. In the end, Anna opened the folder with a tremor, took out a pen and signed the documents. She gave Lisa the signed papers the next day. Jack found out about it right away. He received a message from Lisa and just smiled. This was the last part of his plan. Now he was in full control. Jack was sitting in his spacious office with a great view of the city. The sun was already setting, casting soft rays on the walls, but his heart felt neither warm nor calm. He looked at the message that had just arrived. She signed. "It's official." Next to these words, Lisa added a photo of Anna sitting on a park bench with a depressed expression, holding the documents. There was so much pain and loss in her eyes that even the cold-blooded Jack thought for a moment. Had he achieved his goal? The feeling of victory was not as sweet as he had thought at first. He had destroyed Adam's life, taken everything from Anna: children, career, even the right to a future. But instead of satisfaction, There was only emptiness. The hatred that had been accumulating for months was now slowly dissolving, leaving only a burning question: what next? What now? He leaned back, allowing himself to relax for a moment. The last few months of his life had been one of endless planning and waiting for the moment when Anna would lose everything. He had gained full custody of the children, deprived her of the right to participate in their lives, and now formally and legally Anna was only a distant memory to them. But was this a victory? Jack began to realize that he did not feel any real joy from his revenge. And yet he was not going to give up. His children would stay with him now. He would make sure they grew up happy, without the shadow of betrayal or lies to haunt them. Jack decided that he would now focus only on the children and their future. Anna, sitting in her now almost empty apartment, finally realized that she had become a shadow of herself. She had lost everything: her family, her money, her love. And the worst thing is that now even her children will not consider her their mother. They have even started to forget about her. Only a few weeks ago, when she met her and Jack by chance at the mall, her son saw her and asked, "Dad, who is that woman?" That question continued to tear her heart apart. Back when she signed those papers, she thought she was doing it for her children, to be able to see them at least occasionally, even for a few minutes. But now that she had lost even their memory of her, her existence had lost all meaning. Jack kept his promise. A month after signing the documents, he allowed Anna to meet the children once. They met in a children's cafe, where Jack sat nearby, watching closely. The children were sitting next to Anna, but their gazes were alien, without any warmth, without any memory of the happy days they had once spent together. Their little hands were clutching the edge of the table, and their eyes often darted to John's side, as they trusted him alone now. "Hello, my little ones," Anna whispered, trying to hold back her tears as she leaned over to hug them. But they didn't come up to meet her, didn't even move, just stared in surprise. Her daughter, Lily, finally asked quietly, "Why did you leave us, Mom?" Anna froze. She didn't know what to say. Her words were stuck in her throat, and the pain that tore through her chest felt like she was going to choke to death. I didn't mean to," she began, trying to pull herself together. "I've always loved you." But her son, Thomas, looked at her with a mixture of incomprehension and disgust. "Dad said you don't love us anymore because you're a bad person," he said coldly. Anna shook her head, tears streaming down her cheeks. No, that's not true. I love you more than anything in the world," she whispered, trying to find at least a hint of the feelings they once had in their faces. But Lily squeezed her brother's hand and said quietly, "We want to go to Daddy." Anna felt her heart break completely. She tried to hold them back, tried to find the right words, but instead she could only sit and watch her children get up from the table and walk over to John. He calmly hugged them both, keeping his eyes on Anna. There was triumph and cold calculation in his eyes. "Thank you for meeting me," he said briefly. "We have to go." Anna just nodded. Her hands fell helplessly into her lap, and she watched her children leave the cafe without looking back, along with the man who was now their only family. She tried to shout, to stop them, but her voice betrayed her. She just sat silently as they disappeared behind the door. When Anna returned home after that meeting, she could think of nothing else. She lay on her bed, looking at the ceiling, tears streaming down her face as her body went limp. She realized that she had lost them forever. No one would ever give her children back to her, no one would ever make them love her again. And all of this happened because of her own weakness, because she believed that her love for Adam was more important than anything else she had. The following weeks passed in complete darkness. Anna stopped going out and socializing with people. She avoided calls, letters, any contact. The world disappeared for her. She no longer worked, had no friends, only emptiness and pain that consumed her from the inside. And then one day, when she no longer saw any sense in her existence, there was a knock at her door. It was Lisa, the same woman who had brought her the documents to relinquish custody. "You need to talk to Jack," she said sternly. "He wants to meet." Anna flinched when she heard these words. "Meet with Jack?" Why? She was sure their story was over. He had achieved his goal, destroyed her life and taken her children. Why did he want to see her now? Anxiety flashed through her heart. She looked at Lisa, trying to unravel her intentions, but the woman's face remained unmoved. Why? Anna asked quietly. Her voice was weak, barely audible. I can't tell you the details, Lisa replied dryly, but he wants you to come to his office tomorrow. It's important. You have to go, if not for your own sake, then at least for the sake of the children. Anna tried to understand what was happening, but her mind was blank. For the sake of the children? What more could he ask of her? She had already given up custody, lost all her rights. Perhaps he decided to offer her some new conditions? Or humiliate her even more? Anna remembered Jack's cold gaze in the cafe when the children ran to him. She couldn't predict what he was up to this time, but she felt that refusing was not an option. Okay, she finally answered, lowering her head, I'll come. Lisa nodded briefly and walked away, leaving her on the doorstep. Anna stood there for a long time, trying to realize what this meant. Something deep inside her whispered that this meeting could be her last chance, a chance to somehow get her children back, to change her situation a little. But another voice, darker and more desperate, said that Jack would break her heart again. The next day, Anna arrived at Jack's office, which was located in the city center in a glass and metal skyscraper. She stopped in front of the entrance, trying to gather her courage. Her appearance left much to be desired. Her face was gaunt, her eyes were tired, and her hair, which had once shone with health, was now dull and shapeless. She hardly recognized herself when she looked at the reflection in the mirror door. The guard, whom she had seen when they had lived together, looked at her carefully and nodded, allowing her to enter. He knows too, Anna thought bitterly, everyone knows. The thought was unbearable. She lowered her head as she walked past everyone, feeling every stare pierce her, even if it was only her imagination. As she reached the top floor, she found herself in front of the door of an office she once knew well. Jack had always held meetings here, back when she had often visited him at work, bringing coffee or just coming to support him. Now this office was a stranger. She took a deep breath and knocked. Come in, a familiar voice said. Anna opened the door and cautiously entered. Jack was sitting at his large wooden desk, wearing a sharp business suit. He looked impeccable as always, confident, cool, collected. His face wore the usual mask of calm, but she noticed something new in his eyes. Something that hadn't been there before. Perhaps a hint of fatigue or disappointment. Sit down, he said briefly, pointing to the chair in front of him. Anna sat down, feeling her fingers nervously clench into fists. She didn't know what to expect. For a few seconds they just looked at each other in silence. Jack seemed to be studying her, assessing her. Finally, he broke the silence. Do you know why I called you? No, Anna answered, barely audible. Jack leaned forward slightly, resting his elbows on the table. I want to end this war, he said, and Anna froze for a moment. What does he mean? I've done everything to make you lose everything you had. I took away your children, destroyed your lover, deprived you of your career, your status, but you're still here. You're still trying to hold on. And I ask myself, why? Anna could not find the words. What did he want to hear? She began to feel the tears coming to her eyes again. Jack. She began, but he interrupted her. You know, when I found out about your affair, I wanted to destroy you. I wanted you to feel the same pain I felt. And I achieved it. But instead of relief, all I got was emptiness. His voice trembled for a moment, but he quickly pulled himself together. I took everything away, but you still keep fighting. You came here knowing that I could humiliate you again. Why, Anna? Why don't you give up? Anna looked at him, not believing her ears. Was he really asking her why she was continuing? She looked up sharply, and something in her eyes changed. Because I want to see my children, she said, her voice finally holding the strength she had long since lost, because despite everything you've done, I'm still their mother. I know you ruined my life, but I will never stop fighting for them. Even if you want to erase me from their lives, I won't let you do it completely. You can control everything, but you can't make me give up on them." Jack looked at her in silence. His eyes narrowed slightly, and he noticed the previously hidden fire in her eyes. "Do you want them back?" he asked sharply. Anna pressed her lips together but nodded. "I know you think I'm a bad mother. And maybe I am. But I love them more than life itself. And if there is even the slightest chance to become a part of their world again, I'm ready for anything." Her voice no longer trembled. She spoke clearly, directly, without a shadow of doubt. Jack leaned back and crossed his arms over his chest. "All right," he said quietly, "I'll give you a chance." Anna froze, feeling her heart pounding somewhere in her throat. You are serious?" she barely managed to breathe out. "Yes, but you have to prove that you deserve it." Jack leaned forward, his eyes hard again. "I'll give you 6 months. In that time, you have to get back to a normal life, find a job, show that you can take care of yourself. If I see that you have really changed, we will reconsider the terms of your custody. But if you fail again," he stopped, a cold smile on his lips, "then you will lose the children forever." Anna sat in front of Jack, not believing her ears. Was he really ready to give her a chance? She could feel her heart beating faster, but not because of joy, because of fear. It was like the last battle for survival. If she couldn't prove her strength, she would lose her children forever. And Jack, this cold man whom she had once considered her friend and lover, was now her judge. 6 months, she asked again, trying to comprehend what she had heard. "Yes, exactly 6 months, Jack confirmed, watching her reaction. "That's enough time for you to demonstrate that you can change and become someone the kids can respect. You need to find a stable job, create appropriate living conditions. And most importantly, show that you are able to take responsibility." Anna felt her whole body tense. This was more than just a request. It was a test that Jack had deliberately set up so that her efforts could easily come to naught. She realized that if even one detail in her life went wrong, if she made another mistake, Jack would use it to finally push her away. "But how can I?" she began, but Jack held up his hand, stopping her. "It's not my job anymore, Anna. If you really want your children back, you will find a way. I won't help you, but I won't hinder you either. You got so much money after the divorce that it's enough to start from scratch," he said, a little mockingly, "and no more dating, no more romances. Just work, stability, and kids." She stared at him, feeling tears welling up in her eyes, but she held back. She was no longer allowed to show weakness. If she wanted to prove herself as a mother, she had to be strong. Even in front of Jack. Even to the man who had so ruthlessly destroyed her life. "Okay," she finally said, looking up, "I accept your terms." Jack leaned back, looking at her intently. "Don't forget, Anna, I'll be watching you all the time," he said coldly. "I have people who will report to me on your every move. The slightest mistake and you will never see your children again. Do you understand?" She nodded, feeling the words catch in her throat. "I understand. And, thank you," she said, barely audible. "Thank you." A smile tugged at his lips, but his eyes remained cold. "It's not a gift, Anna. I want to see you fight. Remember, I've already won once, and if you fall again, I will destroy you completely." He stood up, signaling to her that the conversation was over. Anna stood up too, feeling her legs trembling. She knew she had a long and painful road ahead of her. But now she had a goal. She could no longer afford to fall. She had to prove that she was capable of being the person the children deserved. "I won't fail," she said, trying not to look away from his eyes. "We'll see," Jack replied. He opened the door, giving her the opportunity to leave. Anna walked out of the office, feeling her heart pounding somewhere in her throat. But this time it wasn't just out of fear. It was out of determination. From that day on, Anna began to build her life from scratch. It was hard at first, it's almost impossible to find a job when your name is associated with scandals and betrayals. All potential employers knew about her story. Even those who had never met her in person turned her down as soon as they heard her name. Old colleagues who had once worked with her on big projects wouldn't even pick up the phone. Her reputation was ruined, and it seemed impossible to restore it. But Anna didn't stop. She tried dozens of jobs, from simple office work to internships at small design firms. She accepted low salaries, long hours, and the most difficult projects. She worked nights, sleeping only a few hours a night, trying to prove her worth. Every day was a challenge. Every failure seemed like the end, but she kept going. A few months later, after numerous failures, Anna found a job in a small design studio on the outskirts of the city. It wasn't the same prestigious company she had worked for before, but it was her opportunity to get back into the profession. The owner of the studio, an old, stern man named George, was initially hesitant to hire a scandalous person, but when he saw her passionate commitment to the work, he gave her a chance. "You'll work overtime," he said at the interview, looking at her closely. "You won't have any room for error. And if you're late or fail to deliver even once, I'll fire you." Anna just nodded. "I'm ready to work as long as you want. Just give me the opportunity," she replied firmly. And George did. At first, she did the simplest work, editing drawings, creating layouts, helping with paperwork. But gradually, noticing her perseverance and talent, George began to trust her with more responsible tasks. Anna worked 7 days a week, often spending all day at work, but it was her only option. Every time she wanted to give up, she remembered Jack's words, "I will always be watching over you." This thought drove her forward, made her get up after every setback. Anna's every day began the same way, with an alarm clock at 5 in the morning, a cold shower, and a short breakfast that she barely had time to prepare. Then it was a long commute in crowded transportation to the studio, where she worked from morning until late at night. Her only lunch break often turned into a few quick sips of coffee between client calls or completing urgent tasks. Her life no longer belonged to her, it was subject to the rhythm set by George and the rules dictated by the need to survive. The initial period of work in the studio was difficult, almost unbearable. She started every day with a task that required overtime. The owner of the studio, George, watched her like a predator waiting for the moment when the prey would break. He would have fired her at the first sign of weakness. But Anna did not give up. She endured, worked, did more than expected, and every time her hands gave out, she remembered the eyes of her children in that café, cold, indifferent, as if they were looking at a stranger. Several times Anna wanted to leave. She would come home so exhausted that she couldn't even sleep. Her body ached and her head was filled with thoughts of work and what she hadn't yet accomplished. Trying to focus on tomorrow required more energy than she had ever put into any of her old projects. But every time she got up, she went again, even when it seemed hopeless. One day, as Anna was finishing up a complex project, George lingered in the office, watching her work. Ignoring his presence, she kept working on the detailed design, adding the little touches that made her project special. When the clock struck midnight, George finally spoke. "Do you realize you're not just working here, you're fighting?" he asked, looking at her sweaty face. Anna raised her head sharply, looking at him with tired eyes. George never spoke to her for more than a few seconds, only giving her tasks and checking on her progress. "Fighting," she repeated, not understanding what he was getting at. "Yes, you want to prove something, to someone, but not to yourself." George moved closer to the desk, slowly looking around her workplace, higher standards, more difficult tasks, bigger projects. "You're not doing this for a career. You do it because you want to give something back." "What is it?" Anna fell silent. She knew that George was guessing at part of her story. He couldn't help but hear the gossip that was circulating among her old colleagues. But this question struck her to the heart. She didn't want to answer, didn't want to open her wound again in front of another person. But on the other hand, her answer was her truth. "I want my children back," she said, barely audible, lowering her head again. George remained silent, looking at her carefully. Jack doesn't give me the right to them. He took everything from me," she continued in a trembling voice. "He demands that I prove that I deserve to at least meet them. If I can't, if I fail, I'll never see them again." Her words hung in the air like an accusation. She was afraid to admit it, afraid to even think about what would happen if she failed to fulfill the conditions. But she also realized that there was no point in hiding her motivation any longer. Her pain was what drove her, and even George now realized it. He continued to look at her silently, and then suddenly spoke. "Fighting for children is not a job, Anna," he said quietly. "And if you think that one job is enough, you are mistaken. You have to be ready for more than just working without sleep and weekends." Anna felt tears rolling down her face. She quickly wiped them away, trying to keep the remnants of her composure. "What am I going to do?" she whispered. George looked at her with a mixture of pity and understanding. He came closer, taking her hand in his, and squeezed it gently. "You have to become stronger. Not just a good worker, not just a competent designer, but a strong woman who is not afraid to fall and get up again. Jack wants to see you broken. He wants to see you fail. And the only way to win this war is to show that you are more than a victim." Anna stared at him in surprise, not understanding why he had suddenly become so frank. He had always been cold and distant, a stern boss who showed no compassion. But now his eyes had a warmth in them that she had never seen before. "Why are you helping me?" she asked, barely finding the words. George sighed softly, letting go of her hand. "I have someone else to fight for," he answered briefly, and it was more than enough. Anna nodded, wiping away the last of her tears. She realized that from now on she has more than one chance. She had a goal, but now she also had someone who believed in her. It was strange, but also nice. And from now on, she decided that she would not let herself or George down. And, of course, her children. The following months turned into a whirlwind of hard work. Not only did Anna work hard, she began to take on more complex tasks, offer her own projects, and go beyond the usual workflow. She earned George's trust and even got the opportunity to lead several large projects. One of them turned out to be extremely challenging. It was a project to restore an old hotel in the city center, which George's studio had been working on for several years but was constantly facing problems. Anna took it on as a last chance. She knew that if this project succeeded, she would finally be able to declare herself as an independent designer, and this could be a key proof of her ability to take responsibility. George gave her freedom of action, but also warned her. "This is your peak, Anna. If you fail, you will fall back to the bottom." She worked non-stop, putting all her time and energy into this project. And when they finally completed it and the hotel reopened, George watched with pride as news and magazines began to write about the successful restart of the historic site. And every time the names of the project participants were mentioned, her name was at the top of the list. "Anna Lawrence is a talented designer who has changed the face of the city." Anna stood in front of the facade of the renovated hotel, looking at a huge banner with the words, "Renovated Masterpiece, Anna Lawrence's Project." Her name appeared next to George's brand, and for her, it was not only a symbol of success, but also an indication that she might finally be returning to who she once was. She had come a long way from being a broken woman who had lost everything to a professional who was being noticed again. But the real test was to be the conversation with Jack. 6 months were over, and now it was time to take stock. Anna took a deep breath and gathered all her strength to call him. She was afraid that Jack would find a way to refuse her or make new demands. But she couldn't wait any longer. The phone rang only a few times before he answered. "Hi, Jack," her voice was quiet but determined. "Hi, Anna," his tone was flat, unemotional. She couldn't tell if he was happy or angry. "What do you want?" "To talk. I've completed the 6 months you asked for. I found a job, I've been able to establish myself in my profession, and I want to see my kids." The words were out of her mouth before she realized how important they were. Jack was silent for a moment. Anna even thought the connection was broken, but eventually he answered. Good. Tomorrow at 3, at our old house. But it won't be a simple meeting. I want to make sure you've changed. His words were cold as ice. I'm ready, Anna replied firmly. When she hung up the phone, her hands were shaking. The old house, their old house. The same house where she had once been happy, where their children had grown up. Now it was a symbol of everything she had lost. And Jack wanted to hold their meeting there so that she could feel this loss even more. The next day, Anna arrived at the house early. She stood in front of the familiar facade, trying to calm her feelings. Every brick of this place used to be a part of her happy life. Now the house seemed alien to her, big and cold, as if frozen in time. Anna gathered herself, remembering George's words, "You have to be strong." Jack opened the door himself. He looked as he always did, confident, reserved, with a flawless smile on his lips. But that smile no longer had the same meaning to her as it once did. "Come in," he said briefly, gesturing for her to come inside. Anna took a step into the house, and instantly a wave of memories swept over her. Every detail of the interior was the same as it had been when she left. The living room, the kitchen, the children's room on the second floor, everything was the same. Even the smell, the light scent of coffee and fresh flowers that she had always associated with their life together. Jack led her deeper into the house, where the children, Lily and Thomas, were sitting on the couch. They looked up at her, and for a moment, her heart beat faster. They had grown up, even though it had only been 6 months. Their faces were no longer so childlike, and something new appeared in their eyes, caution and distrust. "Hi, kids," Anna knelt down in front of them, trying not to show how much she was worried. "Hi," Lily said quietly, but Thomas remained silent, looking at her with suspicion. "You're back again?" he asked sharply, and there was something in his voice that made Anna shudder. Anna looked at Jack in confusion. What had he told them? What lies had he put in their children's heads? I want to see you because I miss you," she whispered. "I always want to be with you, even for a moment." Lily, small and gentle, looked at her with pain in her big eyes. "Dad says you're bad. That you left us," she said. "Is that true?" Anna could barely hold back her tears. She tried to find the right words to explain, but any explanation seemed inadequate. She knew that children saw things differently, through the prism of Jack's hatred. "I made a mistake. But I love you," she finally breathed out, "and I never want to leave you again. I'm ready to fight for every day with you, if only you'll let me." Thomas frowned, then looked at his father. "Is she telling the truth, Dad?" he asked, his voice cold and distant again. Jack came closer, crossing his arms over his chest. "It's not my decision, Thomas," he said calmly, "it's your choice. But remember that Anna has to prove that she has really changed. She's here today, but tomorrow she could be gone again. Are you ready to trust her?" Anna clenched her hands so tightly that her fingers turned white. This was another one of Jack's games. He was setting her up to be judged by them, making it up to the kids to decide whether she should be given a chance. But how could she convince them if he had been nurturing the image of a bad mother all along? "I'll never leave again," she said firmly, looking directly into Thomas's eyes. "If you let me, I'll come to you, I'll show you how much I love you. I will do everything every day to make you see who I really am." He looked at her for a moment longer, then suddenly stood up and came closer. "Prove it," he said shortly, looking her straight in the eye. Anna froze, looking at her son standing in front of her. His eyes radiated a seriousness and determination she had never expected to see in a 7-year-old boy. He didn't look his age. What they had been through had taken away his childlike carefree spirit. And if Thomas used to be cheerful and carefree, now she was faced with a little defender who took his father's side and demanded answers from her. "Prove it," he repeated, and his voice sounded like a challenge. For a moment, Anna didn't know what to say. Prove it? How could she prove to them that she had really changed, that she would not leave them again? Words had no weight. At their age, they only understood actions. But how could she show them that she deserved their trust, if every step she took from now on would be viewed with doubt. I'll do my best, she replied, barely audible, feeling the tears coming to her throat. Thomas looked at her for a few more seconds, then, with a sigh, took a step back and turned to his father. Are we going to let her stay tonight? He asked John, as if he had made a final decision. Jack, whom Anna had been watching out of the corner of her eye the whole time, looked almost pleased. His eyes were glistening coldly again, but at the same time there was a shadow of curiosity in them. Yes, she can stay for dinner tonight, he said calmly, but afterward, we'll see if the children want to see her again. Anna could hardly contain her sigh of relief. Dinner. One dinner. It was so little, but at the same time more than she could have dreamed of. She looked at the children again, trying to catch a hint of a positive attitude, but their faces remained tense. Thank you, she whispered, lowering her head, I promise I won't disappoint you. Dinner was difficult. They sat at the large table in the kitchen Anna had once set up herself, every detail reminding her of a time when things were still good. She remembered choosing the furniture, the kitchen utensils, even the old napkins that now seemed stained and impersonal. This place had been her home, but now she felt like a stranger. The children sat in silence, keeping their eyes on her, and Jack calmly picked at his food as if this situation was completely normal for him. Anna tried to start a conversation, to ask Lily about school, to ask what Thomas was doing. But each of her attempts was met with short answers or shrugging. So, what did you do at school today? She asked uncertainly, trying to create at least some kind of atmosphere. Nothing, Thomas replied, picking at his plate with his fork in concentration. What about you, Lily? Did you have an art class? Her voice trembled with tension. Lily looked up at her with her big eyes, in which Anna tried to find some sign of understanding. But the girl just shook her head. We're not allowed to take extracurriculars without my father's permission, she said quietly, glancing at Jack. Anna froze. Permission? This was new. What else was Jack forbidding them to do? What else did he control in their lives? She wanted to ask, but realized it would only make things worse. I understand, she finally replied, trying to hide her despair. After dinner, the children stayed in the living room to play a board game, and Jack suggested that Anna go to the study. She nervously followed him, not knowing what awaited her. When they entered, Jack closed the door and stopped, turning to her. Well, you behaved pretty well today, he said, a little mockingly. Thomas didn't make a scene, and that's progress. Anna could barely resist the urge to object. She knew that every word he said was a provocation. But right now she couldn't afford to get emotional. I want them to know that I'm always there for them, she said softly, no matter what, they deserve to have a mother. Jack smiled slightly. You're very naive if you think I'm going to let it go that easily, he said, crossing his arms over his chest. 6 months ago, I was sure I was going to break you. But you're still here, still trying to prove something. It's even a little bit exciting. So I decided I'm going to give you one more chance. Anna tensed, looking him straight in the eye. One more, she whispered. Yes, Jack walked slowly around the office, as if considering each word. I'll let you see the kids once a week. They will decide for themselves whether they want to continue these meetings. And if in 3 months I see that they are really happy to see you, I can revise the terms of custody. Anna froze. Once a week? This was another tiny chance, but at the same time it could be her last opportunity. 3 months, she repeated, looking at him, and you'll really reconsider the custody? Jack paused, looking at her with a mixture of mockery and thought. Maybe, he finally said, but remember, if they start to feel pain again because of your presence, I will take away even that right. This will be your last chance. Anna nodded, realizing what was coming. But now she had a plan. She would no longer allow him to keep her away from her children. She would do everything she could to win back their trust. If that means going through all hell again, she's ready. Now she will focus not on her job or career, but on her family. She will get their love back, no matter how hard it is. I accept your terms, she said firmly, looking him straight in the eye. Jack just nodded, but something flashed in his eyes that she couldn't quite put her finger on. From that day on, Anna began a new phase of her life. She promised herself that from now on she would focus on her children and do everything she could to gain their trust. But Jack didn't leave her much room for maneuver. He wanted everything to happen according to his rules, meetings with the children only in the presence of a third party, a nanny he hired to keep an eye on Anna and record every conversation. All of their meetings were recorded, and reports on Anna's behavior were carefully reviewed by Jack. The first week after this arrangement was a real test. Anna arrived at Jack's house on the appointed day, full of hope that she would be able to spend at least a few hours alone with the children. But it wasn't so easy. Her meetings took place in a neutral place, a small coffee shop near the park, where they used to spend time together, walking as a family. But now everything looked different. Anna came early, nervously looking at her watch and trying to convince herself that she could handle it. A few minutes before the appointed time, Lily and Thomas appeared at the door with the nanny, a stern woman named Margaret, whom Jack had obviously chosen on purpose. Her cold stare seemed to scream that she did not trust Anna. The children saw her and immediately stopped, not knowing how to react. "Hi, kids," Anna stood up from her seat, smiling as sincerely as she could. "Hi," Lily nodded, but remained standing next to Margaret. Thomas did not answer. He just looked at his mother in silence, and in his eyes was the same look again, the look of a person trying to figure out if he could trust her. They stood there as if waiting for a command from the nanny before taking a step forward. "Sit down, I ordered your favorite cakes," Anna tried to ease the tension, pointing to the table. On it were the small chocolate cakes they always ate together when they came here after a walk. She hoped that it would remind the children of the times when they were happy together. Lily sat down next to her, but Thomas was still standing. Margaret gave Anna an incredulous look, pursed her lips and sat a little further away, opening her laptop. She clearly wanted Anna to know that every word, every gesture would be recorded. "You could have talked to us, Thomas," Anna said quietly, trying not to show her disappointment. Thomas hesitated for a moment, but then cautiously sat down across from her. His eyes remained alert and his body tense, as if he were ready to get up and run away at any moment. "I know you're angry with me," she began, unable to contain herself. "I deserve it. But I want you to know that I'm not leaving you anymore. I will stay here, even if it's hard for you to believe me now." Thomas pressed his lips together. "Dad said you said that before. And then you left again," he said shortly. Anna felt her heart clench. Of course, Jack could have twisted everything that happened. He had portrayed her in the children's eyes as someone unstable who always left when things got tough. "This time it's different," she whispered, "this time I'm willing to do whatever it takes to stay by your side. And I'm not going anywhere until you ask me to." He looked at her in silence, and then, with a sigh, he glanced over at Lily, who was quietly savoring her cake, and shrugged slightly. "Maybe you're not lying," he muttered, but his voice was still too hard to be taken as reconciliation. Anna didn't know how to react. It was only a small change, but it was more than she could have hoped for. Now she had to prove it not only with words but also with actions. Each subsequent meeting was no better. The children remained cold, especially Thomas. He always sat in silence, listening intently as Anna tried to talk about simple things, school, friends, what they liked. Lily would smile from time to time, but her smile was timid and quickly faded as soon as Anna tried to approach more personal topics. Each of these moments hurt Anna. Her children were becoming strangers to her, and she didn't know how to break through this ice wall that Jack had built. Thomas once even asked, "Do you want to take us away?" Anna froze, not knowing what to say. "No, I don't want to take you away from your dad. I want us all to be together. I want you to have two parents," she exhaled. "We don't want to live with you," he said sharply, and this phrase pierced her through and through. "But why, Because you abandoned us," he finished, and went back to eating as if the conversation was over. Anna felt her arms go weak. That phrase had been echoing in her ears all evening, all week, as she waited for the next meeting. You abandoned us. She had to fix it. But how could she fix something that was already broken? Jack followed their progress closely, receiving regular reports from Margaret. Their every dialogue, every movement, everything was described and analyzed. At first he was happy to see the reports describing how Thomas and Lily continued to keep their distance. But over time, something began to change. Anna, despite their coldness, did not back down. She came again and again, trying to make each meeting special. She brought the books she used to read to them at night and tried to do puzzles with them, the same ones they used to do as a family. She noticed that even when they weren't talking, they were watching her. And one day, when Thomas thought she didn't notice, he gently took one of the pages of the book she was reading and continued reading on his own instead of pushing her away. This small moment was a tiny victory, but it meant the world to her. As the weeks passed, Anna's meetings with the children became less and less stressful. She continued to come every week, always smiling, even if she went home with a broken heart after each meeting. But she did not give up. The children began to answer her questions more and more often, and Lily even asked her once to help with her homework. It was a small but significant step. Gradually, the cold wall between them began to crumble, piece by piece. The biggest progress came when one day, during a regular meeting in the park, Thomas ran up to Anna and quietly said, "Do you promise you won't leave again?" His voice sounded almost like a whisper, and Anna felt her heart clench with excitement. She sat down next to him and looked him straight in the eye and said, "I promise, Tomas. I will never leave again. You are the most important thing in the world to me, just like your sister. I will always be here for you." He nodded silently, but this time he did not turn away. Instead, he leaned lightly against her shoulder, the first physical contact he had initiated in months. Anna could barely hold back tears of joy, afraid to scare him. She just sat there, feeling like her son had given her a chance for the first time in a long time. 3 months later, on the day her probation ended, Anna stood in front of the door of their former home again. She had come at Jack's invitation. Her visits with the children were no longer so tightly controlled, Margaret had left her post, and now she could spend time with them without constant surveillance. It was a small victory, but Anna knew that the final decision was still to come. Jack invited her into his office, just like the last time. He was sitting at the same desk, looking at her with the same cold, reserved smile. But this time, there was another emotion in his eyes: surprise. "I have to admit, you have exceeded my expectations," he said, looking at Anna carefully. She raised her eyebrows in surprise. "Thomas has started talking about you as someone important. Lily, she's talking about you again before she goes to bed. That's more than I thought you could accomplish," he continued, "but—" Anna clenched her fists, expecting a catch. There was always a "but" on his part. "But I still don't want to give you the children," Jack said firmly, his voice filled with the same coldness. "I've lost too much because of you, Anna. You destroyed everything we built together. So even if they start loving you again, I will never agree to let them live with you. I can let you see them more often, but—" Anna raised her hand sharply, stopping him. "I didn't come here to ask for your consent," she said, her voice calm but determined. "You can keep them here, behind these walls, but I will always be there for you. I will accept your every challenge, I will go through your every trial. I don't want to take them away from you, Jack. I want us both to be a part of their lives, whether you want us to be or not." His eyes narrowed and he leaned forward. "You think you get to decide? After everything you've done?" "Yes, I've made a lot of mistakes," Anna said, standing up straight. "But now I see that you're using them to hurt me. This isn't about the kids anymore, Jack. This is about you and me. It's about your hate. And I'm not going to let you manipulate them to get back at me anymore." A shadow of anger appeared on Jack's face. He wanted to say something, but at that moment the door opened and Thomas and Lily entered the office. "What are you doing here?" Jack asked sternly, but the children did not stop. Thomas walked over to Anna and took her hand. "We want Mom to stay," he said quietly, looking directly at his father. His voice was firm, decisive. Jack froze. He looked from one to the other as if he couldn't believe what he was hearing. "But, she left you." "She left," he exclaimed, unable to contain his anger. "She made a mistake," Lily interjected, standing next to her brother, "but she's here now. And you can't take her away from us, Daddy." Anna felt the tears well up in her eyes again. Her children, her little children that she had almost lost, were now standing in front of her, holding her hands, protecting her. Jack sat down slowly, and his shoulders slumped slightly. For the first time in all this time, his confidence was shaken. He looked at them, then turned his gaze to Anna. "Do you both want her around?" he asked quietly. "Yes," the children answered simultaneously. Thomas clung to Anna tighter. "You can't take Mommy away again," he added. Jack was silent, and in that silence was the severity of what was happening. Anna held her breath, waiting for his answer. He sat for a few more seconds, then sighed heavily. "Okay," he finally said, barely audible, "she'll stay. But only—" "No strings attached," Anna said sharply, daring him to stop her. "This isn't a game anymore, Jack. You've seen that I won't back down. We have to find a compromise for their sake." Jack fell silent, looking at her with a new, unexpected respect. He nodded slowly. "Good," he said quietly, "for their sake." Anna took a deep breath. It wasn't a victory, but it was the first step. She knew that there were still many challenges ahead, but now, standing next to her children, she felt that she had regained the most precious thing she had ever lost. Now they were together again, and that gave her the strength to keep fighting. "Thank you," she whispered, looking at the children holding her hands. This was only the beginning. But now she will not stop. This story shows how mistakes can destroy lives, and revenge can take more than we expect. Do you think Anna deserves a second chance? Or should Jack forgive her for the sake of the children? Write your opinion in the comments, we want to hear from you. If you liked this story, please like it, subscribe to the channel, and be sure to click on the bell so you don't miss new exciting stories about life, mistakes, and attempts to fix things. See you in the next video. Friends, thank you for watching our videos. We try to create interesting and high-quality content, but if mistakes happen, please understand. We are not native speakers, but we always try our best to make sure that each story conveys the emotions you feel. Your comments and support motivate us to work even harder. Thank you for being with us.